if you are interested enough to want to look further into the Bible, you might want to know about these things because they're extremely interesting helps, and they're something that can be used by the layman as well as by the scholar. There's a Bible called the Thompson Chain Reference Bible. That's this one. The Thompson Chain Reference is set up in such a way that in the columns here, they have some numbers. You may see a number like 3059 or something. And that will relate to a word in the text that's marked there. Now this book, Thompson Chain Reference Bible, and this book, which is Hebrew Aramaic Lexicon with the Bible, both of these and this one, Interlinear Hebrew Greek English Bible, all three of these use the same numbering code system that matches this book. The Greek section, the Hebrew section, or whichever, and look up the number. It will tell you the word in Hebrew, what it means, what the possible translations were. If there was a mistranslation, what might have been a better word. It will give you the Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic derivation of the word as it appears in English. So, as for example, this is what I did with the first verse of the Gospel of John, when I pointed out to you that in English it reads, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God." When I looked that up in Greek, what John had written was, "In the beginning was the Logos." And the word Logos in Greek does translate word, but that's not the best translation. It would have been better if the translators had written, "In the beginning was the expression," because Logos in Greek also means expression in English. And then instead of saying, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God," and so on, it would have said, "In the beginning God expressed himself," and the expression of God is love and life and light in mankind. It makes it totally different, easier to understand if you can see what that original word was and the possible translations of it. So with this Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, you can look up any word in the Bible. You can find out what the original Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek word was that was actually written by the author, and an explanation of what that could mean in English. This book is only for people who really want to study. This is the guy who took the ancient Hebrew that is unreadable unless you know what it means. But he took it and made comparisons until he did what he calls establishing the meaning by radical analysis, which means that he took the letters and wrote out to see what all the possible meanings were. He spent his entire life decoding the Hebrew tongue. So the book is called The Hebraic Tongue Restored, and it's by Fabre d'Olivet. It's written originally in French, and it is in English now. This one is, this book is only on the book of Genesis. And if you know, in the Bible, Genesis takes like 60 pages perhaps, and you see the size of this. What this is, it reads from right to left as Hebrew does, and it gives you the Hebrew version of Genesis and then the commentaries of rabbis down over the centuries, going all the way back to the Essene community and right up until today. So there's There are commentaries on the meanings of each story, everything you read, all the way from metaphysical commentaries to very literal commentaries and so on, comparisons, and sort of digging out what the analogies and the metaphors might be. So there's a series of these on the Old Testament, on every book of the Old Testament. So I only have the one on Genesis, but there are 56 of these books in this Art Scroll series. So there's a lot of information out there that you can get if you want to dig into it. This is the most recent book of Talmudic studies. It's done by the leading Kabbalistic scholar at Hebrew University in Israel. And this one will enlighten you about everything from the Hebrew letters. He gives you this much commentary about what just the glyph itself means, how it originated, what it's a picture of, what it tells you standing alone, and then the ways that it's used in a word, so that you understand that English has letters, but Hebrew has pictographs. It has pictures, and they say more than letters. And you can find from something like this how that kind of language works, a pictographic language, or even hieroglyphic language. They are so very similar. The origin of the Hebrew letters and the origin of the hieroglyphs are so similar that you see how they unfold in the same ways. So anyway, I brought those in just to show you where a lot of this information comes from and where you can get it if you like.
With regard to the Lamsa Bible, how does it compare?
The Lamsa Bible, of course, well, there are problems with it. The best thing about Lamsa is that he knows the Aramaic idioms, which means that figures of speech and expressions that we would never pick up by direct translation in any way. There is no doubt that Jesus spoke Aramaic, but he also spoke Greek. Some of the books of the New Testament were written in Aramaic and some were written in Greek. Lamsa treats them as if they were all written in Aramaic, which is not quite correct, but it's still worthwhile to study because he knows the culture, he knows all the intrigue that was going on behind the scenes. So it's worthwhile from that point of view, but we know that several books of the New Testament were written in Greek, and Jesus spoke both Greek and Aramaic. There's not much point in translating the Old Testament from Aramaic because it was written in Hebrew, not Aramaic. So Lamsa might as well have stayed with the New Testament as far as I'm concerned. And then the book of the Revelation, even though it was addressed to a Greek man, it was probably written in Hebrew. It was neither Aramaic nor Greek, but Hebrew. And the reason I believe that is because he uses an Old Testament style of apocalyptic writing.
Because I bought the Aramaic Bible. So what would you think is the best to go with that? Fill in what isn't taken care of?
The easiest one to work with is Thompson chain reference. You get the King James Version in here, but you also get so many helps about where to look for other information that the Lamsa Bible will be easier to read, and you'll get meanings from it that you won't get from King James. And from the Thompson chain reference, you just get so many helps. You can look up things in Hebrew, English, Greek, and word names. Anytime you're dealing with an Old Testament story and there are people's names, you have to look up the meaning of the name in order to get the metaphor. So you need a Bible that has a Bible dictionary in the back that gives the meaning not only of obscure words, but of names as well. And many of your Bible dictionaries give you only words but not proper names.
Does the Lamsa Bible have the same number system?
No, it's not keyed to concordance. These are the only ones that I know that are key to Strong's.
So you feel, Paul, that's the best one?
That's the best study Bible, yeah. It's not the best reading Bible for understanding the English. The New Jerusalem Bible is the best by far for getting correct meaning. They went back to the old manuscripts. They didn't even come through the Septuagint. They went back to the Nag Hammadi library and retranslated everything. So the New Jerusalem Bible is excellent. It's easier to read than King James. But for all the helps that it gives you, the Thompson Chain Reference Bible with Strong's Concordance gives you more information than you can get from any other single place or any other two books. There's also a book I didn't bring in here, I think. It's called The Bible as History. That book to me is invaluable in studying the Bible. It tells all the research that the archaeologists have done in the last 100 years in seeing exactly where Abraham lived, how Abraham lived. My image of the Old Testament changed when I found out that Abraham's father's house had indoor plumbing, running water. And that, 3,000 years ago, that sort of revolutionized my thinking about these Bedouins living in tents. Abraham grew up in luxury. He lived in a house that had a courtyard, and it was a 2-story house that had running water. So there are things like that you'll discover in books like this, The Bible as History, that are pretty enlightening sometimes.
I have a very good version I have an Atlas Bible, which was produced by Reader's Digest, and you can follow on the Atlas, all the things Jesus did and what happened all around that time. And it's very good somebody starting to really get the picture of what was going on.
Yeah. There are a couple of those that I might like to show to you, but the Thompson Chain Reference Bible also has this in the back. It has atlas, it has maps. It shows what Solomon's Temple looked like, the outline of Old Jerusalem, where the different tribes were. It follows the travels of Jesus, and here's the travels of the Apostle Paul, everywhere he went, where he stopped, and so on. So there's a lot of information in there for someone who wants to study it. Also, any words that were actually attributed directly to Jesus are written in red. If you see, this is Jesus' words are put in red for help with that study. There are a couple of others that you might be interested in. If you want to go further with it, I'll go in and get them. There are 2 books that are done by Hebrew scholars, non-Christians, historically tracing Jesus from a non-Christian perspective, which makes quite a difference because they look at the evidence in a different way. So there's a book called The Historical Jesus, and there's another one, Jesus the Jew, Historian's Review of the Gospels. But there's another one in the other room I'll show you in just a minute. It has a lot more photographs, and it shows the Essene compounds where the early Christians lived in Jerusalem. So that's a background just about where you might get more information on some of these things. We're going to switch now to Kabbalah. And just to introduce Kabbalah, what I'd like you to know is that Kabbalah is, as far as I know, the oldest form of physics in the world. Kabbalah is not a religious textbook. It's an attempt to explore physics, how the world was created. And the Sephiroth on the tree of the Kabbalah, the Sephiroth that compose the Kabbalistic tree, are attempts to show how creation came from life and thought into gases, liquids, solids, how atomic structures came from photons being charged by the mind to become electrically charged. These then can be combined into any atomic structure and can be physical form. So that is that's the precipitation or manifestation process that God used, and it's the same thing that we use in the Prosperity Workshop to say, if you can start with the first world of Kabbalah, which is the idea or inspiration is what you want to manifest. Then you take that and you give it an image, you put the light to it, you charge it with electricity. You hold the image to impress that upon the formless substance, and you bring it into visual form and then into physical form. So if you can bring it through the four worlds, you can manifest anything from whatever, diamonds, rubies, a house, life mate, partner, $1 million, whatever you want to manifest, just do it the way God did it, because the same process still works. Sorry, fellows, none of those are the ones I had in mind, but I know exactly where it is, so I'll go and get it. In the meantime, you want to introduce the four worlds of Kabbalah?
Remember that? She wishes that a red book.
I don't particularly want to start with the four worlds. No.
Okay, you don't have to start with the four worlds. You know where you want to start, so do that, and I'll come back in just a minute. I'm going to get this one book just to show them real quick.
You guys need to understand that what we're attempting to do tonight is introduce you to a system that basically communicates the structure of the whole universe. So we're just going to breeze into that briefly and then go on to how it relates to all three of the Star Wars films. Okay? So understand that we're going to move through it so fast that your brains are going to come out scrambled. Get this up here. Let's see. So I still keep screwing around with trying to figure out exactly how to start with it.
Ein Sof.
Yeah. Paul mentioned last night that there was the Torah, the Mishnah, and the Kabbalah. The Torah was the written word, the Mishnah was the spoken word or the interpretation of the inner wisdom, or the interpretation of what is written to help understand it more in depth. And then the Kabbalah was the actual insight or understanding beyond that could not be written. What you very often hear today is referred to by the word Kabbalah. They're talking about a system of symbols and teachings that try to help us reach that inner understanding. So there's this system of Kabbalah, and then there is the actual experience of Kabbalah, or the understanding and the insight itself, the mystical insight. Without going into a lot of history about it, at one point, when a group of the wise rabbis got together, they were discussing how to put these things all down into written symbols and to describe what all the different levels were and what this nameless name is, what the force is, or what the source, or what God is. They started giving names to everything, and as soon as everything had a name and this whole structure was laid out nicely, one cute little old rabbi stood up in the back and said, well, now that we've named it, then that's not all that there is, because when you give a name to it, you limit God, and God can't be limited. So they all said, okay. They gave that another name. The name that was up and above that. And he stood up again and said, well, now that we've named that, it's got to be something beyond that. And they said, well, okay, we understand that. What is it that's just beyond what we've just described? And they named that. And then they all did was just stood up. Didn't have to say anything. They got the point. Every time you give a name to it, You only name an aspect of all that God is, and you don't incorporate all of it. So we're working with different symbols that talk about different aspects of all that is God, or all that is the Force. The Force is what the way it was being referred to in the Star Wars films. What we're going to do is talk about some principles that operate on many different levels. I'm going to let Paul deal with what's called the four worlds. But first I want to give you some real general background. There's a book called The Quantum Gods, written by Jeff Love. And in this book, he takes a slightly different approach to introducing these principles. Let's see. Oops, what is it? Ein Sof and Ein Sof Or. When the rabbis had named all of the different levels and aspects of God, and they figured they had it all covered, and when that little rabbi stood up and said, well, there is something above all that, they called that something above all that the Ein. Or is that limitless light?
Limitless miracles, limitless life.
Okay. Ein, and then Ein Sof, and Ein Sof Or is like, okay, that's what we can't name, and we're naming what we can't name, but that's about as far as we can go. Jeff Love tried to give a different way of describing that. He said, here's the first page. Now that I've got something written on that page, I have to use this page. Here's the first level. This level of all that is pure light. So on the page, we would symbolize that as just a white page, right? So the first level is pure limitless light. This next page, imagine that this page were all black, all dark. If I had the book, I could show you. It's just a completely black page. This is unlimited potential, all potential. We've got one level, limitless light, all white, all light. One that seems all black in comparison, unlimited potential. That's two. And then the third one here, this is the page that does not exist. You see, it's not really here, because if it was here, it would be a page. But it's actually a page that does not exist. You got that? Well,
The nameless,
the nameless.
kind of.
Yeah. Well, this is the way we're just trying to symbolize. What creation is, all of creation, or what all that is God is all of these three together. It's not that they exist in different places like these three different pages, but they're all together. Now if you printed that on a book page, what you'd have is all these little dots of black and white mixed in so finely together that you can't quite see the difference between them. They're all mixed in together. That's all that is, plus the dots that don't exist. So you've got little white dots and little black dots and little dots that don't exist. That's all that God is. Limitless light, unlimited potential, and that which goes beyond all of that. All that God is right here in front of you eyes. Well, at some point, God withdrew himself from a certain space. He's filling all that is the universe, and all of a sudden God withdraws itself. The force withdraws itself and creates the void. This is the void. Now this, let's see, I think this action of withdrawing himself, itself, was called zimzum. Zimzum. It means contraction. Now, the image that we usually get is that there's some place that God doesn't exist, and that's hell, and there's some place that God does exist, and that's heaven. And what this is showing is God is everywhere, and what he did was withdrew himself to create a void, or an image of a place where God doesn't exist. And then, in 10 stages, I didn't count them, but 10 stages, this life expresses itself into the center of the void. And this is the lightning path, or divine intent, or divine will. Kav. All that God is expresses itself into the middle of this void. And this is creation. These are the stages of creation, the 10 stages of creation. It's said that those 10 stages of creation happen on 4 different levels, as if, let's see, give me 4 more books here. See, this is a 2-dimensional page here. So it's almost as if everything has to happen just on these 2 dimensions, but we live in a 3-dimensional world. We can go beyond that. It's as if all these 10 stages are happening on 4 different levels at the same time. So we're getting a little bit more complex. And all of this that is expressing itself into the void. Does anybody, I know that we didn't cover it in the ILC class that we did here in January, but do you know the image of the spark of light? You know, there was the source of light that exploded and sent out sparks out into the universe. And there is this spark of light that carries all that the original spark carried. Oh, we did? Okay.
Yeah, we did the diagram.
Here's that spark of light. And when that spark of light looks around it, what does it see?
Depends on the direction.
Depends on what direction?
Yeah, well,
Every direction it
what
looks.
we did
the
was
same thing is
we
there.
had the spark of light going out and not looking back to where it came from. Is that the one you're
Well,
talking about?
look at it here, okay? Here we've got, out here is all the little dots, the white dots, the black dots, and the dots that don't exist. Limitless light, unlimited potential, and what even goes beyond that. And in here is the void, and here is a spark of light. When it looks around itself in any direction, what does it see?
Light.
Light. Why does it see light?
Because light's all around.
Light's all around it. That's all it can see. It isn't going to look out here and see the black. You don't see black. All you see is light. You're not going to see the dots that don't exist because they don't exist. What it will see is, out here is this unlimited source of light. But it feels so far away. I'm stuck here in the void. And so we all feel like little sparks of light cut off from our source, and we're all trying to get back to our source. And so the trip from here back to here is what evolution is all about. Involution, excuse me. This is evolution, this is involution. Returning to our source, climbing up all of the stages of growth that will bring us back into unity. And the trick to the whole thing is this void doesn't really exist. It doesn't really exist. If I realize that I carry all here that exists here, all of a sudden, all this will be everywhere. I'm looking to expand that to fill the void. The stages of growth that I go through in learning to become one with all that God is, always was, and still is, all those stages are the stages that we look at in the Kabbalah. They're stages of growth to us. Let's see, what else did we go through? And there are many different ways to look at those stages. There are some traditional names that are given. I'm not too good on the four worlds, so I'm going to skip that over that. Let Paul deal with it. These are the 10 Sephiroth, or the 10 stages of emanation along that lightning path. It's called the path from, this is the point where, the point of oneness or unity where where that lightning path meets all that God is. One way to work with understanding what these stages in growth are is to learn the images and the names that are given to each of the stages, to meditate on them, to apply them to, how could I say it? Apply these principles to things in life that we have experience with so that we can see how the principles are at work. I'm not going to go into a whole lot to this. That would be a whole weekend. I think we could cover the whole structure of the universe in one weekend. Well, we're not going to try to do that either. What I am going to do is put up an image that I think we can kind of relate to. Hold on. So we can understand, get some kind of understanding for what these stages of growth are, and then how we can relate the personalities of those stages. As if you personified each of those stages, personify them and see how they interact in our daily life. This is the principles related to human evolution and the stages of growth that we go through. This is the lowest stage, the physical manifestation stage, the physical body. The next stage is the ego, the false identity, not the real self, but all of the image, the false image of the ego that we most often identify with, connected with the body. Oh boy, how should I go about this? Well, I'm going to write them all up here first, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Is he waiting to come back and present a portion of this? Check with him to see if he is. These are stages of growth, of trying to return back to our original divinity. And if you'll notice, those along this side have a certain quality that those along this side don't have. You notice that these are arranged in 3 different pillars. This is called the left-hand pillar, or the pillar of form and structure. This is the right-hand pillar of force. This is usually referred to as the masculine, expressive, outgoing qualities, and these are the negative or the form-giving qualities. This is the pillar of balance, balance or beauty. And so all of the stages along this pillar will have qualities that relate to taking the force of life and putting a form into it, or putting that life into form. All of the stages along this pillar will have the quality of expansiveness, expressiveness. And all of those in here relate to balancing these two so that they're in harmony. Oh, this is the pillar of harmony, that's right. Balance and harmony. Do you have questions so far? Does it look like it makes sense so far? What we said? In a way, can you see that these two here, theory and practice, they're two opposite sides of the same coin. They're not two different things, really. They're two opposite sides of one balancing coin. When I can take my ego, learning theories about evolution, about growth, and putting them into practice, and balancing those two of theory and practice, I can lift myself up to discovering my true self. With inner discipline and compassion to balance it. Discipline taken too far will take me off of the pillar of harmony and out of harmony with all of life. Compassion without discipline will do the same thing in the other direction. So I need both of these balancing qualities in order to help continue reaching up toward inner knowing. And I need what's called reason and revelation. Revelation without reason, it doesn't give any structure in my mind. And did you ever have like an insight that comes and then you just can't quite grab what it means? You know there's something there, but you can't get a hold of it? That's a way to describe how you need both the principle of reason together with revelation to bring that down into inner knowing. Whoa, this is so hard to... Before we go on to comparing all of this with the Star Wars things, do either you or Paul have anything you want to add or talk about in relation to Kabbalah?
I don't, other than just let him know that tomorrow we're going to do the same thing with numbers,
Right.
which will help.
Okay. Are you all sitting there going like, because it makes sense, or because
It makes sense.
it just goes,
No, that makes sense.
okay, that makes sense. All I've done here is I just put up a structure here that relates these principles to the path of human evolution. You could take the same thing and relate it to a government and see the different aspects of a government. Or what else could you relate it to?
Organization.
An organization,
Business.
the business. Any other, what are some of the other basic things that we usually do with it, Sharon? Blah, 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 blah.
Education system.
An education system.
Society.
A society, you can relate it to just an individual and the different levels of awareness in a person, an individual, from, again, from the elemental stage to the physical body, to the ego, to the higher emotions and the higher intellect and the spirit. You can apply the principles to anything and understand the workings, the inner and the outer workings of that system.
The growth of civilization.
And see, this is how, what Paul has said is, if he could just know a little bit of information on any topic, he could apply that information to the structure of the Kabbalistic system, and he could give a whole lecture on how that thing works. Because all that you need to know is revealed in this system. Well, let's go back to Star Wars. See, the whole group wakes up all of a sudden. We have the same structure of all those different principles. And you have a story, and the story is we're all trying to overcome the evil empire and get back to a universe that is balanced. We're living in a universe that is imbalanced, where there is strife and the evil forces are in charge. And we're trying to get back in harmony with the Force. And we start down here on the desert planet. Now this lower Sephiroth is usually called Malkuth, or the kingdom. This is the earthly kingdom. This is the level where these higher principles come into physical manifestation here. But we begin the story on the desert planet. Because there's no life now, we're not prospering in our universe because the evil empire is destroying things rather than creating and building them. And we go into the bar. The bar scene where all those little ugly characters were. They represent even lower powers that in the Kabbalistic system are called the dweeps. Everybody loves that word. The dweeps, W-E-E-P-S, at least that's the way we spell it. They're, again, the animal nature in force, controlling through the appetites and greed and so on. But we have, fortunately, a Jedi Knight, Obi-Wan Kenobi, right here. He is an individual who has worked with theory and practice and has brought himself up to a point of experiencing his true inner self, and has kept himself balanced in working with the Force. He's always saying it's the Force that flows through him that does these things. It's not him. He's not the one. It's the Force acting through him. And he is leading this young, egotistical little character that is the student, all of us as students, working on our egos. And Luke's got this overblown ego of thinking he's just going to go out there and save the universe. Da-da-da-da. And fortunately, he's being guided by a teacher. Right here. And then we have the two characters, C-3PO and R2-D2, the droids. Over here, it's the very structured. I mean, those of you who remember the movie, C-3PO was very structured in everything that he did. His movements were very structured, and he moved like this. Just like a robot would be. And everything that he did had to be very precise, and he liked it that way. And over here, R2-D2, you never knew what he was going to do next. He just off for adventure. And these two guys were going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth all the time, representing the argument of our self-talk. The child in me that wants to go for adventure and just experience, practice. Learn by experiencing. Well, over here, C-3PO wants to do the right thing. Let's figure it out first. Let's only, do what we've been told we're supposed to do. Follow the theory. Follow what we've been told. Perfect embodiments of those two different principles. And we find Han Solo, the human counterpart of, the hero, the swashbuckler, the crazy character who he doesn't want structure. Don't bitch at me. Don't tell me what I'm supposed to do. I'll do exactly the opposite. And Leia, the princess, who's a real tough nut. I mean, she even wears her hair pulled back in a tight bun. Very disciplined. She's more like an army sergeant dressed up in a princess's robe. So her personality is very disciplined, very precise. We've got to get the job done. And she's always trying to discipline Han Solo.
Did she have those little things?
Yeah, she had, that's right. But it was also tight and
Very dramatic.
Right. You don't see her hair come down until the last movie. Then it really comes down.
She didn't embrace the feminine, right?
Huh?
She hasn't embraced the feminine.
No, well, it's a different type of feminine.
Yeah.
The structure. She's very structured. This is the pillar of form. This is the pillar of force. And if they're not balanced, what would happen to a character like Han Solo without discipline and direction? If he's not careful, he's going to get caught. If he goes too far out with his craziness, I mean, again, those of you who saw the movie, there was one particular scene where there's this whole army of bad guys chasing them down these corridors. You usually think the smart thing to do is run away. What did he do? He turned around, one guy with one gun, and he just runs after them, yelling at the top of his lungs, "Ah!" like this, and they all turn and they run away from it. You know, pure courage that just totally unleashed can be incredible, can have incredible power. And at the same time, it's got to be balanced with structure and form. So those two embodiments there. And old Ben here is the inner self. Now he meets Darth Vader. Darth Vader is, he personifies a knight along the path who came to, he came up to this level and he got kind of selfish about it. You know? When you start to reach that point where you're discovering higher and higher truths and unleashing greater power as a result of it, there's that sense of, yes, I'm powerful and you're not. Oh, it's me who is the source and the force of all of this stuff. I can control things, you guys can't. So he dragged his ego up here along with it and tried to make it personal rather than being impersonal as old Ben was. He represented, let's see, the initiator here in this movie. Oh, by the way, just to point out, in the Kabbalah, in this system, this particular Sephiroth is called Doth. That's one of those things that's not really an accident.
What does Vader mean?
No.
Darth Vader isn't actually, is that not the level of knowing?
Well,
It's not there, but your encounter with him brings you.
Could you repeat that, Stephen?
okay, the question was, doesn't this level represent the level of knowing? Which is not necessarily a bad thing. It isn't if you have been able to let go of the ego. But if the ego thinks that it's what knows, then at this point, I want to be reflecting the light of the Heavenly Father, not the light from down below. I want to let go of the ego and let my true self reflect the light from above. This level, this is the center of the whole tree, on the center pillar and in the center from above and below. This is the Christ in you. This is called Tiphareth, excuse me. Inner knowing is up here. We'll get back to that in a second. This is the true self, the Christ in you. This is the level related to by Christ who sacrifices himself in order to become one with the source. Letting go of the fear of holding on to the ego and holding on to the body, sacrificing all of that in order to become one, so that he doesn't try to identify what is below with this. He lets that force come down and recreate and rebuild his body and his personality. It's a real quick, abbreviated version of the crucifixion and the resurrection. And you see that in every one of the Star Wars films. Old Ben lets his body and his outer personality die. And when he does, he becomes greater than Doth could ever imagine. He moves from there to there, and Darth Vader can't go for him now. He can't kill his body now. He can't kill his ego now. But he also can't stop him from teaching Luke. Now he becomes an inner teacher through the Force to Luke. And Luke is still trying to move along this path so that he can confront this challenge. And remember, the challenge that Luke has to confront is not actually this guy who runs around with a big black helmet with a black cape on. That's not the challenge that Luke has to confront. Luke has to confront the Darth Vader in himself. He has to confront that part of him that says, I want to be the one to save the universe. I can do it. Forget about what my teacher says. Forget about whether I'm in harmony with the Force. I can do it. The cocky part. And that was the part that he didn't do in the second film. Da-da-da. So, in the first one, we've got Luke down here, the student, working on his ego. We've got these two characters over here balancing one another out. We've got Darth Vader, and old Ben makes a transition from being the embodiment of the inner self to letting that go and becoming one with the Force and teaching Luke through the Force. In the second one, we've got Luke in the same place and C-3PO, these two characters there. We have an ice planet and the Dagobah system. Hoth is the ice planet. It's the place where the rebellion comes to experience discipline. Remember, the rebellion was this group of people who were very loose. They weren't focused in together. They were all, let's see. Not, yeah, in a sense. They were very adventurous. And that adventurous, outgoing quality is very much this side of the pillar, the pillar of Force. But without discipline, they wouldn't be able to focus and accomplish their purpose. So they all get dragged over here onto the ice planet to get themselves some discipline and focus. And then Luke goes over here to this Dagobah system, this very primitive place where life is teeming, just all over the place. And who does he meet there? He meets Yoda. Now, what... I shouldn't have put him up here. Mix them all up and tell me where Yoda should be and why he should be there.
Yoda should be on
Which pillar?
the right. Compassion.
Yoda? Compassion?
Yes.
I don't think Yoda... Did you see the movies?
I didn't see. No, I didn't
No,
see
just
that
from
one.
the description.
It isn't. I missed it from the story you said this morning.
Okay, well, describe what Yoda did. Yoda was a teacher. He rode on Luke's back and pointed out to Luke every single thing that he did that was wrong. He picked his brains apart. He made him work and work and work and work and work. Where should Yoda be?
Initiator slot practice.
No, not the initiator slot. Practice. He should be over here somewhere.
Yes, that's on the right side.
No, we're practicing
Oops.
down the bottom.
Oh, practice? No.
Yeah.
That's experience. The practice, experiencing. He made Luke practice. I mean, Luke had to practice here on this planet, that's true. Yoda needs to be over here. He was a disciplinarian. You know, he was talking to this guy, this student, and when he was talking about Luke, he kept saying, your mind is never where you are at and what you are doing. You can't actually get specific and get real and get right here. You're always off into these crazy fantasies.
Did you give us reason as that? Yeah, you've got reason
Yeah.
for that.
Reason.
Yeah, somehow
Reason and discipline.
Discipline.
they kind of is-
discipline.
Should
got
you be down
halfway
for
there.
layers? Discipline.
Because he gives the reason that lets you unwind or.
It's
If it's on the same,
Say it this way.
if it's on the same level as the revelation, isn't he the reason side of the revelation that Luke is experiencing by getting this learned?
He actually belongs here. And if I could say it, this is a lower manifestation of that one. This is a lower manifestation of that one. You could say it that way. This is all the pillar of form. And Yoda is a higher teacher. He is trying to teach him and discipline him and show him what the Force is. He's trying to teach him what the nature of the Force is. Now, usually when we talk about reason, I think we're describing, intellectuality, logic. It isn't always reasonable, actually. This is a higher form of reason, what really is. That's what Yoda is trying to show to Luke. And he's got to really work hard on him and discipline him. He's got to use all the things on, along this pillar. But you can see the quality that Yoda has of discipline and structure. In taking a personality who is too far over to this side, Luke's personality is too wild and reckless. He doesn't know how to use his lightsaber very well. Just all over with it. Ben is right there. At this, say it. This is where it gets complicated. Ben is obviously one with the Force, but if you remember the way that Ben, as a higher teacher, relates to Luke, he's always inspiring. He tries to make him feel really good. He tries to give him these little flashes of insight. He only comes into Luke's mind when Luke needs a lift, and his words are always kind and, oh yes, at least for a while. That's the relationship that Ben has with our student, Luke, in trying to work on his ego to get him to be a Jedi Knight. Does that make sense so far? No. Okay. This is where you get into, is Ben actually at this level, or is he at this level, or does he belong here or there? It's all relative. In relation to Ben is, Ben is the Force. Ben is also his inner self. In relation to our path as a student, seeking to become an initiate, in relation to Luke, who's playing that role, Ben resides right here. And the Force is the Force. And good old Darth Vader is right here. Now Luke is down here, and Yoda is trying to work on him to get him ready to make this transition. And Yoda tries to tell him, you're not ready yet. He had a test in the cave, and the test had him meet Darth Vader, and he wasn't up to it. He used his anger and aggression. He let it get carried away with him. Remember that he was the first one to draw the sword. He attacked. He's still too far over to this side, and that's what leads him to being out of balance, and that's what leads him to following the dark path, the dark force. He doesn't have control and balance and harmony. He's not in harmony with himself. He's still in conflict. So Luke hasn't made it up here yet, gang, but he tries. And the second movie tells us what happens to someone who tries to do this, but isn't ready. And remember, this is the left-hand pillar, and this is the right-hand pillar. What happens to Luke when he tries to fight Darth Vader? Anybody remember the story? He got which hand?
Right.
The right hand. He had to get his right hand cut off. He followed the karmic path. Get out of balance, too far in this way, you get your right hand cut off. Get out of balance too far in this way, you get your left hand cut off. If something offends thee, cut it off. Pluck it out. Take that thing out of your life so that it doesn't tempt you to get out of harmony with the Force. So it seemed like a horrible thing to happen to him, but it was a good thing to happen to him, because it brought him back to reason. He wouldn't listen to reason from his teacher who rode his back and nagged him. Actually, he wanted to get away from that. You know what I mean by that? I'm sure that part of what was motivating him to go out and save his friends was because he wanted to get away from this guy who was riding his back all the time, driving him crazy. And go out and do what his purpose really was. So, oops, Luke doesn't make it on the second film. And everybody's still in these places. And in reality, Darth Vader's playing this role. So far, Darth Vader has been his initiator. The one who challenges Luke to face the ego and to try to make this transition of becoming one with the Force. Hasn't been able to make it yet. Okay, we go to the last one. Because Luke was not able to make that transition, he's got to go back to some of the basics. And what he does is, Han Solo has been captured. And Han's down here now. Way down here with the dweeps. And the evil appetites have taken control because our student has been too out of balance. Our universe is out of balance. Harmony doesn't exist, and the appetites are actually in control of our what? Compassion. And isn't it true in the second movie? What quality did Han Solo exhibit? It was even a surprise to him. He didn't expect it. He exhibited compassion for others in his character transformation. But because we're out of balance, that compassion gets captured, and we got to take all of these characters down, and R2-D2 comes down here too, into the underworld and conquer them, into the world of the appetites. And Luke comes down here and faces Jabba, the stomach. Jabba the slug. He looked like a big, huge, overblown toad. Slimy, sluggy, gooey. And to make a long story short again, we win. And we see that Luke has actually reached that level, and we bring everybody back up here, ready for the big fight. And something else happens. Remember in the second movie, Luke lost his lightsaber. He didn't have a lightsaber anymore. It was a lightsaber that his father had given to him. Now he's got to rebuild his own lightsaber. What is the lightsaber? Where does that fit here? Not completely.
Self.
Not exactly. It's a part of it. That's a part of it. That's a part of it.
Is protection his ego?
Protection, that's closer. It's protection, but not just the ego. The Force. It is the Force.
The higher he's climbed, the more truth he's got, the more power he's got to...
The more power he has, yeah, to...
He has to build it from his own experience, not from what his father gave him.
Right.
He has to become a virgin and build his own relationship.
He has to rebuild his own. You remember what color, for those of you who saw the movie, do you remember what color his lightsaber was when he rebuilt it? No?
Green.
Not purple, it was green. What does the color green tell you? Life,
Yeah.
healing,
Living love.
peace, living love. What color is it in the spectrum?
Middle balance.
It's the balance! It's the pillar of balance. And that was the whole thing that he's trying to learn, how to rebuild his own power, his own energy, the force that flows through him, and build it in balance and harmony, not out of balance with the force, so that he can control it. Remember before, at the beginning, he just took out his sword and whacked away with it, anywhere he
What was
could.
it then at the beginning?
It was blue. It was given to him from above. It was blue. So what we have to learn here as a student is how to take charge of our own power, our own force, the force of life that flows through us, the kundalini, the sexual creativity, and put form around it, balance it with this pillar of form, and use it only where it needs to be used, not out of harmony. The sword cuts both ways, and if I use that power out of harmony with the moment, I'm going to cut a part of myself. Now, this is the teaching of the Grail Knights. They were always told, in fact, Arthur was told, he was asked actually by Merlin, which is of more value, your scabbard or your sword? What do you think Arthur said? Arthur said the sword. He was wrong. It shows you why he lost his sword. And he was told, I mean, Merlin told him, no, the scabbard is the more valuable. It's a magical scabbard, and it will protect your sword, and actually will protect you from being wounded. If you have that scabbard with you, you will never be wounded to the death. You'll never be able to have your force or anybody else's force used against you in a destructive way if you know how to use yours to balance the expression together with the form.
In the Mists of Babylon, it was the women who fashioned the scabbard and made it
The feminine quality.
protected.
In many of the myths, it's the woman, the feminine, let's see, the feminine aspect that brings the form to balance off the masculine force. And only together in harmony, and there's a tendency in the way that we interpret a lot of stories to make one good and the other bad, or one bad and the other good. The fact is, neither of them are good or bad. In balance, they're harmonious. What we're looking to do is see all these different characteristics as parts of ourselves, that when we bring them into harmony, we create our own lightsaber. Now, if you think about the whole lightsaber image, for those of you who've who've listened to the tapes or taken some of the classes on transmuting sexual energy, remember we talked about our body being built in a certain way, and that the energy that flows through us is like a laser beam. And if we can take that laser and return it toward its source, if we can focus it and send it in one direction rather than all over the place, we've got our own lightsaber. And it's the energy that moves through the different levels. Pew. Okay, Luke's rebuilt his own lightsaber. And he goes to face Darth Vader. And remember what he's doing is he's saying, even at this point, he's recognizing there is good there. He goes to the darkest place in the universe. And he is determined to see light. Something that Yoda couldn't do, something that old Ben couldn't do. He's determined to stay right on this path and recognize the goodness and the light in Darth Vader. And he faces the Emperor, and the Emperor tries to get him to fall over off of the pillar of balance. Tries to get him to use his anger and his aggression, to use that force in a destructive way. And at first he starts to succeed, and that's when Ben begins to realize that he's just going to become just like Darth Vader. And he decides to not fall off that pillar, but to do the same thing of sacrificing himself just as the Christ does. In that moment, he becomes the Christ. That he is willing to let go of his body, his personality, his ego, knowing that he is one with the Force, and trusting and knowing that the Force always wins. And by doing that, they end up like this. This little circle here at Doth, where you fit on the tree. This is called the tree of life. Even it couldn't be an accident that this is called Doth, and this guy's name was Darth Vader. It couldn't be an accident that this is called Hod in the Kabbalistic tradition, and the planet here so perfectly represented those qualities in relation to the whole rebellion. All of these things are so perfect. It couldn't be an accident that this was the moon. in relating astrology to Kabbalah. And this so perfectly represented the animal nature that in harmony with the inner self as a true leader actually helps as a real power. Overcoming the evil side of the animal nature, you get the Ewoks, who are cute.
What does Endor mean? Endor else?
That's where they went to see. I don't remember.
In the
where
Bible.
Endor was. In the Bible, that's where Saul
In
went
the-
to see the witch.
That's right. In the Bible, Saul went to the witch of Endor. The witch of Endor, she was psychic. She gave him a psychic reading. You know,
Where's
tea
that on
leaves,
there?
right here,
Oh,
the moon of Endor.
Yeah.
Illusion, the world of illusion, the world of psychics, the world of images, the false image that isn't the true self, the animal nature. It's a moon. The moon isn't the real light, it's a reflection of the light.
He went even though they were deceived.
Excuse me?
He went even though that they were deceived. They thought they were going into one thing and then it was another.
Oh yeah, that's true. The whole group went to the moon thinking that they were going to be doing one thing. They found it was a trap. They were deceived. So many different levels. The important thing about this is not that you necessarily can figure out how to apply this to the Kabbalah. It doesn't matter whether you can or not. All of those principles were brought to life in living color on the screen in a story form that inspired millions of people. It inspired millions of people because it spoke the truth about the way life is. If it wasn't in harmony with all these principles, it wouldn't have been so inspiring. But we could all recognize these characteristics. It's like we were all urging Luke to do the thing that he needed to do, and when he didn't, we all said, oh, darn! If only he could have held out. We needed that. It's like having a dream, and you almost make the step, but you don't, and you wake up remembering the mistake and what it feels like. So that when you're going through your daily life, and you reach an experience where you almost make that transition, but you don't quite, then you remember what the dream was trying to tell you, and you have a choice. You can not follow that course of action and make the transition, or you can go ahead and make it and experience karma. So I'm told that we need to break. Yes, it's 10 minutes after 9. So we have gone through creation of the universe and 3 full-length movies that describes all of our path of evolution as students in a mystery school. I'm impressed that we made it. Thank you. We'll come back and talk about the same principles in relation to Kabbalah and sacred numbers tomorrow afternoon.